Well, hello, friends. It's the big moment. Here we are. A couple days ago, in the last video, we took a look at the best shows of the year. And now, it is time to look at the worst shows of the year. The baddest of them all, even. The stinkers that made me regret my life choices. 2024 has been a year of very intense highs and lows in all of pop culture, not just television. Movies have been pretty polarized in their releases. The good movies were pretty freaking good, and the bad ones were absolutely awful. Even in the world of music, 2024 was crazy for music. The highs have been extremely high and the lows have been extremely low. Chappell Roan brought a new breath to pop with her insane takeover. Kendrick Lamar put the entire hip-hop world on the same wavelength. Sabrina Carpenter literally owned the summer with Espresso. Billie Eilish released the best album of her career. Addison Rae probably pulled off the most effective rebrand of all time out of nowhere. Justice released one of the biggest bangers of the decade with Tame Impala, and of course, Charlie XCX reminded everyone with legendary skill that she is, in fact, that girl, with a masterclass of an album in which she talks a lot about, well, mostly how much she loves doing cocaine. God, she really loves her cocaine. And then, on the other side of that, you have the not-so-great stuff. Kanye West officially ruined his own discography. Taylor Swift released the most forgettable album of her career. Camila Cabello made an album I'm still not entirely convinced wasn't a joke. Meghan Trainor still makes music, believe it or not, and it still sucks. Machine Gun Kelly is still trying to prove he can make emo music, and he keeps failing the mission. Tate McRae continues to make music for white people who think water is too spicy, and oh, of course, Katy Perry had what I consider to be the single worst comeback album in the history of music. Like, of all time. The amount of secondhand embarrassment I got from 143 is something I will never fully recover from. Anyways, you get the idea. 2024 has been a year of extremes in pop culture, and television is no exception. It has been an absolute roller coaster, but never in the ways I expected. Because there is truth to the fact that most of the shows I expected to make the top 10 best list of the year ended up not making it at all. House of the Dragon Season 2 didn't make the top 10 list. The Boys Season 4 didn't make the top 10 list. The Bear Season 3 didn't make the top 10 list. That's the first time since the show premiered. Dune Prophecy, which was my single most anticipated show of the year, did not make the top 10 and frankly did not even get close. It's gonna get its own video. I'm very upset about this one. But the bad shows this year? Oh god. The shows that sucked really fucking sucked, and this year was more frustrating than others for me. I felt a lot of emotions making this list because the shows on here either left me completely puzzled and confused, or they left me feeling a brutal sense of rage. You'll see what I mean. Now, as always, this is my list, my opinions. It may not be the same as yours, blah blah blah. You know the song, and if you're pissed at any of my picks, I don't care. I'm literally just a random guy on the internet who gives a shit. But hey, as always, if there are any shows on your list that didn't make my list, feel free to leave them down in the comments below. I always appreciate it when people tell me which shows I should be avoiding like the plague. And on that note, friends, it's time. So without further ado, let's finish off this year by taking a look at the 10 worst TV shows of 2024. Starting with number 10. The Spiderwick Chronicles. To kick off this year's list, we have a show that flew under everyone's radar despite the recognizable IP name, which is kind of baffling when you think about it. I am willing to bet that 9 out of every 10 people watching this video right now had no fucking idea that a reboot of The Spiderwick Chronicles came out this year. Don't lie, even if you knew, no, you didn't. The last we heard of the Spiderwick Chronicles was back in 2008 when the books were adapted into a single movie that did just sort of okay at the box office and that was subsequently forgotten by pop culture and never looked at again. Then, a couple years ago, Disney decided to give it another go and had the book adapted again, this time as a TV series for Disney+. Here's the thing though, the show ended up being so bad that Disney Plus just dropped it. Like, the show was finished. It was there, it was shot, it existed, and everything was completed. It was ready to be released. And then Disney just went, nah, this shit sucks. We're not putting that on here. So they just started shopping it around to other studios. They really wanted someone to get it off their hands, but nobody wanted it. And so somehow it ended up being sold to Roku? Okay, Roku, who released the entire season in one go back in April. I don't remember the 2008 movie. I know for a fact that I've seen it, but I don't remember anything about it. I've also never read the books these adaptations are based on. The point being, I don't know anything about the Spiderway Chronicles, so I could only take this show at face value. I could only judge it as a TV show. And as a TV show, it sucks. It is lifeless and so incredibly boring. It has all of the repetitive issues I keep pointing out with current television. Underdeveloped characters with no personalities, monotonous plot, bad pacing, overall bland visuals, and mind-numbingly tedious dialogue. Like, this is supposed to be a, whimsical adventure series, but this thing is way too boring for kids and certainly too empty to be enjoyed by adults who were fans of the source material. I mean, at least I assume. For all I know, the books are just as bad as this, and this is actually a pretty faithful adaptation, but I doubt it. I kind of equate this series to what happened with Percy Jackson earlier this year, but way worse. You know when a show just feels like a waste of time? It's kind of what I got from this. There's nothing to be interested in here, which sucks because I can tell that the lore, the mythology behind the story, is solid and could be made into a very interesting thing. I don't even need to read the books to tell you that, but the execution is so asleep, my guy. I don't know who this was for. It's bland, it's boring, it looks ugly, it feels lazy. I am convinced I'm the only person on the planet who has even watched this show, and that is totally okay because no one else should. Goodbye. Number 9. The Regime. Okay, listen, alright? The pitch is simple. Kate Winslet in a political satire where she plays a dictator of a fictional country in Europe. And wait, I'm not done. It's written by one of the writers and producers of Succession. I don't know about you, but for me, sold. You got me. I'm down. The contract is signed. On paper, this show is a smash hit and I will be having the time of my life. But then, the show comes out, and I watch it, and respectfully, I gotta ask, what the fuck was that? What went wrong here? How did this show turn out like this? I'm not even gonna beat around the bush here. The Regime is a fucking disaster. It's a complete mess that fails at being the political satire it so proudly claims to be. It is super generic and unfunny. The main job of a satire is to have a message behind its mockery, but the show fails so hard at making its point and is so unbelievably vague in its criticism that the message gets lost in translation. The episodes are way too long. The writing of the show is clearly not clever enough to make the humor land. Every joke sinks like a fucking meteor. It's extremely cringe to watch, and most of all, the show completely wastes Kate Winslet, who just cannot save this thing, no matter how hard she tries. This might be Kate Winslet's biggest miss to date, and Kate Winslet rarely misses. I'm not counting the Divergent movie, she is not at fault for this. The show was a colossal flop. HBO proceeded to swipe under the rug very quickly, and I can't blame them. The entire thing feels like a very long sigh of boredom. It is so monotonous and dull. It doesn't have any legs to stand on. And yeah, I don't even have that much more to say about it. The Regime just sucks. It's bad. I couldn't even finish it. I got about halfway through and I bailed because I value my life at least a little bit. It is an expertly crafted play-by-play guide on how not to make a satire. It is a fumble that fumbled way too close to the sun, my guy. It looks like everyone has already forgotten about it though, and thank God, because that would make a pretty big stain on Kate Winslet's almost perfect resume. I mean, shit, her last TV starring role was fucking Mayor of Easttown, which was one of the best series to come out in the last 5 years. Following that up with this shit is brutal. Anyway, I don't want to keep talking about it. Let's just pretend this show doesn't exist. Number 8. The Walking Dead. The Ones Who Live. I think it is now 2 years in a row that a Walking Dead series is making the top 10 worst list. Last year, we had the final season of Fear the Walking Dead, which was a complete mess. And this year, we have The Ones Who Live. which was a complete mess. But on a personal level, I think The Ones Who Live is even worse in my eyes because it's the one show in this franchise that actually had the potential. And unfortunately for my own ass, I feel like I watched 6 hours of that potential being pissed on. Bringing back Andrew Lincoln as Rick Grimes 6 years after his exit from the main show to finish his story with a 6-episode limited series, it should have been an easy home run. Plus, we got Denai Guerrera back as Michonne, which is always a win in my book, but boy, what a fucking disaster this was. And honestly, the more I've been thinking about it since it came out, the more it pisses me the fuck off. Even with the general decline of The Walking Dead as a franchise in the last, decade, The Ones Who Live had absolutely no right to be as bad as it is. Scott Gimple's slow burn ruining of this franchise has been such a frustrating thing to see, and this bullshit was absolutely no exception. I don't think I'll ever understand his decision to remove The Walking Dead from its gritty survival horror roots in favor of making it a brainless action franchise more attuned to Fast and Furious. But it has all just gotten so fucking weird, it doesn't even feel like the same universe. Everything about The Walking Dead has become so lame. I feel like it just needs to be put out of its misery at this point. I mean, it has, actually, but it just keeps coming back. Like a zombie. Now, I have already made a pretty lengthy video exploring in excruciating detail how a show with this much potential ended up being this bad, so I'll invite you to go watch it if you haven't. Even if you've never seen a single episode of The Walking Dead, I assure you, your mind will be blown by how bafflingly stupid this show is. Flat characters with a plot that doesn't make any fucking sense, a meaningless antagonist they tease for almost a decade only for it to be revealed to be absolutely nothing, and a pretty underwhelming threat at that. An overall story that has absolutely no regard for logic, consistency, or basic common sense. Dialogue so bad, but that thinks itself so sophisticated and philosophical when it really is so surface level, even a piece of paper has more depth to it. And an ending that is so unbelievably absurd that I still have a hard time wrapping my head around it. I was in a complete state of disbelief the entire time I was watching the finale. I could not believe I waited 6 years to get this shit. The Ones Who Live is a bad joke. It's an insult to the intelligence of the fans. It's a betrayal and an absolutely shameful farewell to one of my favorite TV characters of all time. I would have rather left Rick's story unfinished than get whatever the fuck this was as a conclusion. But at least my one silver lining is that this show turned into a definitive exit point from the franchise for me. I am very happy to no longer be a Walking Dead fan. God, this shit was exhausting, and I cannot wait to never engage with anything related to this franchise ever again. Number 7. Pretty Little Liars Summer School. Wow, here we are in a twist that surprises absolutely nobody. A Roberto Aguirre-Sacasa show has once again made the top 10 worst list. What a predictable turn of events. I guess it's bound to happen in repetition when you keep handing beloved franchises to the guy who made Riverdale. After ruining that and ruining Katie Keene and ruining Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, Roberto somehow got his hands on the Pretty Little Liars franchise, and he rebooted it as one of the worst attempts at making a slasher horror I have ever seen. Pretty Little Liars Summer School is the second season of Pretty Little Liars Original Sin, which took on second place in 2022's Top 10 Worst list. And in this current Hollywood trend of TV reboots with no soul, I think this one might have been the worst. Actually, hold that thought, we're not done with this list. Like The Ones Who Live, I've already made a video about that first season, and a few months ago I made a very long video detailing everything that went wrong with this second season, going in depth as I explain how Roberto has never had a single original idea in his life, and all of his projects are just rip-offs of his favorite movies that he tries to pass off as homages, so I'm not going to talk too much about it here. You're welcome to go watch these videos if you haven't. But for the cliff notes, this season is just a Roberto signed checklist of everything you shouldn't do when trying to tell a story. The plot makes no sense, the characters are unreasonably boring, there is no logic to any of their arcs, the dialogue is so bad that it feels like an SNL skit, but even an SNL skit would have better writing. It desperately tries to win fans back by bringing back a D-list character from the original series, a character they proceed to completely ruin in record time, and it has one of the most absurdly ridiculous villains I've seen in a very long time. Oh, because yeah, most of all, the funniest thing about this show is that this is a slasher horror made by a guy who doesn't have the balls to kill characters off. I repeat, this is a slasher horror where characters cannot die. What are we doing? It's a fucking miracle that an idea this stupid was given a second season in the first place, but just like I predicted on my Instagram back in January, Pretty Little Liars Summer School was cancelled after it finished airing in June, and just like every other show from the worst showrunner in Hollywood, everyone has already forgotten about it. I don't think we're gonna hear about Roberto for a good while. This has been one too many fuck-ups in a row for his career. Pretty Little Liars Summer School was an absolute abomination. I am glad this drag of a farce is over. Good riddance. See you never. Number 6. Velma Season 2. Okay, let's get this one out of the way quickly as well. I'm pretty sure most of you guys watching this video didn't even know Velma got a second season after the absolute disaster of a debut it had last year, and I wouldn't blame you for not knowing. I think purely out of shame, HBO Max barely marketed this season. Since animation takes a lot of time to be made, I think by the time Season 1 came out and became known as one of the worst TV shows of all time, Season 2 had already been in production, so they didn't want to pull the plug and reluctantly released it this year. They dumped it as quietly as possible at the end of April and hoped nobody would notice. And they succeeded. Nobody fucking noticed, except for idiots like me. Even the actors in the show didn't promote it. There was no press tour, there was no interviews. Mindy Kaling herself did not make a single post when that second season came out. It's like everyone involved in this thing had a meeting and agreed to pretend like this show does not exist. I'm pretty sure Mindy Kaling deleted every post she's ever made about Velma from her Instagram. Because yeah, in case you don't know, Velma has quite a crazy cast for the absolute piece of shit it is, with some very popular actors lending their voices to characters. Did you know Shay Mitchell was in this show? Did you know Debbie Ryan was? Constance Wu, Melissa Fumero, Ming-Na Wen was in this show, dude. But you'd never know because not a single one of them ever mentioned it after Season 1 came out. And look, I'm not gonna beat around the bush here. Season 2 is just as atrocious as Season 1. It's bad, but like shamefully bad. It's not even funny bad. It's just kinda hard to watch because I get secondhand embarrassment. I already said my piece about this show in last year's top 10 worst list. I don't have anything new to add. Everything that was bad about it in Season 1 is still bad in Season 2. Nothing has changed. It's cringy, it's not funny, it thinks it's really edgy and clever, but it's kind of an eye-rolling drag with nothing interesting to latch onto. Like, this show feels like Mindy Kaling lost a bet and had to make the worst, most soulless, most needlessly incompetent show she could come up with as a dare. I didn't even finish Season 1, and I did not finish Season 2 either, but I don't need to finish it to tell you that it is still one of the worst shows on television. And HBO Max knew that, and they're probably very happy that nobody paid attention to Season 2 when it came out because everybody thought the show had been cancelled after Season 1. And another thing that people noticed even less is that Velma also had a Halloween special released on HBO Max in October, which I assume they also had in production a long time ago and just kinda had to release. Anyway, that's the end of that chapter. As soon as that Halloween special dropped on October 3rd, it was immediately announced that same week that Velma had been cancelled. They didn't even wait to pretend like they weren't ashamed of it. I'm pretty sure they're dying for people to forget this thing ever existed, but not me, HBO Max. Not me. Velma will probably stay in pop culture memory as one of the worst shows ever made, and it completely deserves it. I believe it is currently the worst rated show on IMDb, and IMDb ratings are meaningless, but it's still a little bit funny to me. I don't know who this shit was supposed to be for. I don't think Mindy Kaling and Charlie Grandy knew either. And if this waste of an experiment has proven anything, it's that there indeed are shows that are for no one. Good fucking bye, Velma. You will truly not be missed. Number 5. The Umbrella Academy. Season 4. Well, here's one show I absolutely did not expect to have on this list. Biggest surprise of the year, if you ask me. Now, full disclosure, I'm very late to this train because I've had a really weird run with The Umbrella Academy. When season 1 came out in, 2019? I tried to watch it twice and got bored twice, and I gave up like 3 episodes in. I didn't even know why I didn't enjoy it. I just couldn't get into it for some reason, but everybody seemed to be loving it, so I thought, okay, maybe it just wasn't for me. Maybe I'll give it another go later. And then, over the years, talking with a bunch of friends who were obsessed with The Umbrella Academy, especially with season 2, which people could not stop talking about when it came out, I started to wonder what I was missing with this show. So this year, I finally decided to watch it again, and surprise, surprise, this time I enjoyed it way more. The Umbrella Academy is a fun show. It's weird, it's quirky, it's funny, and it's an effective story about family. Season 1 took a minute to win me over, but I did end up liking it, and yes, season 2 is just fucking crazy. It's a fucking blast. I had so much fun watching this shit. I totally understand why people freaked out when it first came out. Season 3, however, is where the show started to lose me, and it lost me pretty quickly. It feels like it's trying to do too much, but its ideas are half-baked and it gets way too convoluted for no reason, which leads to a boring plot and to character arcs that are just really frustrating. I kinda lost interest there, but while I didn't enjoy season 3, I also didn't think it was atrocious. It was just kinda mid and left me with a bit of a shrug. It's just that it being mid was incredibly noticeable given how insanely good season 2 was. With that said though, what the fuck are we doing? Bro, I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I have no idea how the final season of The Umbrella Academy turned out this bad. I'm genuinely baffled by it. It is rough. I don't understand it. The Umbrella Academy has always felt to me like a show that didn't really have a plan or a through line. It seems kind of obvious that they just kind of made shit up as they went, and as far as I know, this is not a comic book adaptation that really follows the plot of the source material. At least not closely. It's kind of doing its own thing, but even under that lens, this shit was so confusing. Nothing about this season really works. It's kind of a mess. The writing is all over the place. There are so many narrative decisions that are just incomprehensible, especially when it comes to certain characters. Like, bro, they dropped the ball hard with this. What the hell? I don't know how that downfall felt for people who watched this show as it aired and had to like wait years between seasons. Please feel free to chime in the comments, by the way. I'd love to know what that was like for you. But as somebody who binged the entire show this year for the first time, the absolute nosedive The Umbrella Academy takes in terms of quality is so fucking jarring to experience, I don't even have the words. In my head, season 4 at worst would have been on the same level as season 3. But bro, season 3 is a fantastic fucking season of TV next to this mess. Like, it's not just worse, it is significantly worse. The fall off is crazy. I really had to force myself to finish this season, but man, I was not happy about it. Overall, I liked The Umbrella Academy for like a season and a half, but I was never like a fan of it, you know? The show is kind of a mixed bag, but I can't imagine the disappointment actual fans must have felt, especially because this season took a while to be released. I can't imagine waiting 2 years for my favorite show to have its final season to just get, oh, well, actually I do. Never mind. Never mind. But you get what I mean. The Umbrella Academy absolutely fumbled the bag at the finish line, and as unexpected as that is, it gets its spot on the list. Number 4. Orphan Black Echoes. So I mentioned it in another video recently, but back in January, I posted a video on Instagram where I made a bunch of predictions about things that would happen in the world of TV and film in 2024. Whether it be about like a movie doing well or flopping at the box office, a show dying in development hell. I predicted Madame Web was gonna be bad. Can you believe that? But of all my crazy predictions, one of the calls I made that was the most controversial was that Orphan Black Echoes, the new spin-off of Orphan Black with Kristen Ritter, was going to flop hard and get cancelled after one season. After I posted that video, a bunch of people reached out to me calling me crazy and telling me that would never happen, that I was underestimating the franchise power of Orphan Black, and I was told that was one of the worst takes I've ever had. But lo and behold, the show came out in June. It was absolutely blasted by critics and audiences everywhere. The season finale aired the last week of August, and just 2 weeks later, in September, AMC officially announced that Orphan Black Echoes was cancelled after one season. Who's crazy now, bitches? I think alongside The Regime and Velma, this is the only other show on this list that I didn't have the heart to finish. It's 10 episodes long, but I think I tapped out about halfway through episode 7. And I'm sad that this show turned out so shitty, because I am a gigantic fan of Kristen Ritter. I love her so fucking much, and I always want to watch projects she's in. Like, for me, Kristen Ritter being in a project is enough of a sell for me to watch it. And I also really like the original Orphan Black. It's such a unique show with incredibly impressive writing and technical prowess. So you're giving me a spin-off of it with Jessica Jones? I'm in. I am in, my guy. But then I saw this spin-off was being made by Anna Fishko, a writer and producer of Fear the Walking Dead. And now I'm getting worried. By the time the trailer came out, I was completely checked out, but the trailer itself killed any faith I had left in the show. It just looked so bad. Orphan Black Echoes feels like a desperate attempt at reviving a universe that should never have been a franchise, the same way AMC did with The Walking Dead. This story takes place in the year 2052, 37 years after the events of the original series, and it follows Sarah Manning's daughter, Kira, who's now all grown up and stuff, and she tries to help a mysterious woman named Lucy who has no memories of who she is. And if you can put 2 and 2 together with the title of the show, you can guess where this is going. The show feels like a weak echo of the original series' greatness. Get it? Because of the title? Anyway, it's just bad. It's tedious, the plot is uninteresting, the mystery is lame. It's really just a faint redo of the original, but without any of the depth or creativity. It doesn't have much to say either, and it feels like it only exists for the sake of furthering the Orphan Black universe because it was a successful and critically acclaimed show and AMC wants to get more money out of it. This is basically Orphan Black, but if Orphan Black was generic and has absolutely no creative backbone. Which is crazy to say, by the way, because the original series is one of a kind. There isn't another show like this out there. If you haven't seen the original Orphan Black, watch it. You're gonna have a great time. I'm not too upset about this one though, because my expectations were already pretty low going in, so I can't really call it a disappointment, but the contrast of quality and depth between the two series and the complete waste of a really good cast makes Orphan Black Echoes deserve its spot on the list. It's bad, and it should feel bad. Alright, next. Number 3. Emily in Paris Season 4. This one's gonna be quick. I just released an hour-long video about this season of television. I've said everything I could have possibly said about it, so go watch that. It's always a good time to make fun of this stupid show. Emily in Paris Season 4 is objectively the worst season of the show. Sure, it doesn't have the blatant racism and xenophobia of Season 1. They gotta calm down with that. But in terms of writing, in terms of character arcs, which there are none, and in terms of any sort of respect for the audience's intelligence, we are operating at an all-time low here. The show has no story. It's not even trying to pretend it has one anymore. There is absolutely no logic or basic continuity to any of the plot or any of the characters. Nothing makes sense, and the show is just really, really bad. When fans of the show who loved the first 3 seasons, which are all absolutely terrible seasons of television, when those fans are now starting to say that the show sucks and that it doesn't make sense and that it feels empty, you know how low the bar has gotten, okay? The show has now fully accepted that it has nothing to offer, and it doesn't even try to conceal the fact that it only exists to advertise for brands. It will fully interrupt an episode halfway through for a random product placement they don't even attempt to integrate into the story like any other show would do. It will willingly waste your time for half an episode with a bullshit scenario that has no link to the rest of the story only to make a 10-minute ad for an airline. It is just the definition of shameless. Emily in Paris is the most capitalistic show of all time. It is just an excuse for Netflix to make advertising money off luxury brands, or any other brand for that matter. Fuck me, the first episode of season 3 is a 35-minute ad for McDonald's. And because of that, because this show is really just a vehicle for advertisement, the show's not gonna go anywhere. It's gonna keep being around. It's already been renewed for a season 5, while Netflix continues to cancel amazing and inventive series like 1899, The OA, Mindhunter, Dead Boy Detectives, or I Am Not Okay With This. So, yeah, remember that, kids. In the end, capitalism always wins. Number 2. The Acolyte. This one's gonna be long. It needs context. I am about to say something I never thought I would ever say, and my 7-year-old self would absolutely not believe me if I told him. I don't think I'm a Star Wars fan anymore. I think I have finally left the train. I've made a whole video about my opinions of the fall of the Star Wars franchise, but we are now way past those opinions. I'm not even mad at Star Wars anymore. Somehow, in a way that seemed completely impossible to me just a few years ago, I just stopped caring. I genuinely think I am done being a Star Wars fan, and if you know me even a little bit, I've been a fucking whore for Star Wars for my entire life. Even when I didn't really like it, even when it was being mid, even during the Last Jedi era where everyone was just fighting and hating each other in the fandom, my love for this franchise never wavered. Ever since the abomination that was Rise of Skywalker came out in 2019, I have been clinging to my interest in Star Wars because I've been a devoted fan my entire stupid life and I didn't want to let it go. But this long series of bullshit content they've been putting out since 2019 has been really hard for me to swallow. Disney made it incredibly difficult with their insanely stupid strategy of throwing everything at the wall hoping that something sticks. And that's without even talking about all the projects they announced and then cancel. I cannot think of a studio, aside maybe from DC, that has done that more in the last few years. It's honestly kind of embarrassing. I'm gonna go on a tangent here. Just in the last few years, it has been a shit show of unreasonable scale. Initially, the Boba Fett series was supposed to be a movie, set to be directed by Josh Trank, the director of Chronicle. But after Chronicle, Josh Trank made Fantastic. It became the most embarrassing movie in Hollywood at the time, so Lucasfilm panicked and canceled the project. Guillermo del Toro was developing a Jabba the Hutt crime movie that ended up never happening. David Benioff and D.B. Weiss rushed the ending of Game of Thrones so they could go make a Star Wars trilogy that had been announced a couple years prior. But after the disaster of Game of Thrones' final season, Lucasfilm panicked and canceled the project. The Mandalorian was supposed to get a spin-off called Rangers of the New Republic, which died in development hell after Lucasfilm fired Gina Carano from the franchise because she wouldn't stop saying weird shit online. Donald Glover was developing a Lando Calrissian series for Disney+. Absolutely nowhere to be seen. He confirmed himself that the project was killed. In 2020, Disney released a video of director Patty Jenkins, who made Wonder Woman, announcing in her grandiose way that she was making a movie titled Star Wars Rogue Squadron, which was supposed to come out in 2023. But then, the movie just never happened, and it was confirmed to have been shelved by the studio at the end of 2023. Now, in 2024, rumors started to float that the movie was magically revived, but then Comic-Con and D23 came around and nothing was announced. Hey, do you guys remember that in 2019, Kevin Feige was officially announced to be making a Star Wars movie? Yeah, I bet you forgot about that one. It's dead. It was cancelled last year. Rian Johnson was announced to be making a new Star Wars trilogy after the release of The Last Jedi. He developed it for years, and they kept reassuring us that it was coming. Anyways, it's 8 years later, the project is dead. Sean Levy was announced to be making a Star Wars movie in 2022. Yeah, he made Deadpool and Wolverine instead. This movie's not happening. Taika Waititi, director of Thor Ragnarok, was also announced to be making a movie in the franchise like 6 years ago. And back in November, it was reported for like the millionth time that the project has been shelved. Damon Lindelof, the genius behind Lost, The Leftovers, Watchmen, he was set to write the new Rey Skywalker movie that Lucasfilm couldn't shut up about for this past year. Yeah, he's gone, and the movie no longer has a release date. And those are just the projects that are public and that I can tell you about. This franchise is in fucking shambles, and the reality of it is simple. Lucasfilm has been in panic mode since The Last Jedi came out. I think they were so taken off guard by the reaction to this movie and the internet civil war it started that since then, they've just been panicking, especially because they haven't been able to recover at the box office. Solo: A Star Wars Story, which came out right after The Last Jedi, bombed and became the first Star Wars movie in 40 years to lose money at the box office. Then Rise of Skywalker made money, but not as much money as The Last Jedi, which is a red flag for them, and it became the most hated Star Wars movie ever, which they were also shocked by, because if you don't know, Disney was super confident in this movie. J.J. Abrams was super confident in this movie. They thought it was gonna be a fucking hit. They were convinced they were gonna have everyone back on their side after this movie.
You were feeling very confident. Everybody felt very confident. J.J. was confident. Were you surprised by how divisive it was, the reception to it?
I think it's still upsetting because you don't want people to feel like you've like not served the thing that they're a fan of. But Ryan's one was so divisive.
You think?
So, yeah, so it really felt like the first one was fairly, everyone was like responsive in a similar way.
This works, thank God.
Yeah.
How did it happen?
And then Ryan's one, super divisive. And then the last one, super divisive.
Once again, they were completely taken off guard by this, and since then, they've been panicking so bad that they haven't released a movie in almost 6 years, and they keep canceling projects left and right because they're too scared and too disorganized. So they turned to television. With the arrival of Disney Plus in 2020, they started experimenting with the franchise, thinking they could maybe win back the audience this way, and let's just say, it hasn't worked too well. Thankfully, The Mandalorian came in to bring a bit of joy back to the fandom with its first couple of seasons, and it was really good. Until it wasn't. Both Obi-Wan Kenobi and The Book of Boba Fett made my top 10 worst list back in 2022. Ahsoka was mostly forgettable except for that one episode that should have been a movie. The animated shows are pretty hit or miss, and now we have this. All of this commotion, all of this blah blah to get to this. The Acolyte, a show that was announced back in 2020. A show that was initially pitched to us as a story about the Sith. When it was first announced, it was presented as being a tale that would focus on the dark side of the Force. We were told it would be a much darker, much more mature show, and it was also presented as being a murder mystery in the Star Wars universe. All things that on paper should make for one of the best Star Wars projects of this era. After the last 5 years, it was the last bit of excitement I had for this franchise, my last little bit of hope, and I wanted it to be good. The Acolyte officially became my breaking point. It's the show that finally turned off the switch in my brain that made me care about Star Wars. This show broke me. And it's not solely its fault, but the fact that this thing came after everything that came out in the last 5 years, it was too much. It was the straw that broke the camel's back. It's boring as hell. The characters are terrible. The story is so fucking lame. The quote-unquote murder mystery is so fucking lame. The show's big twist is so obvious from the second they start setting it up because the show is so poorly written. I hated every second of it. The only bit of credit I can give to this show is that it does have some of the most badass action sequences in all of Star Wars, but they amount to, what, 6 or 7 minutes of the entire show. You can literally just watch them on YouTube and be done with it. You don't even need the context because the show sucks. A cool fight scene every 2 episodes is not going to save your catastrophic script. I'm sorry. And you know what? I'm annoyed that I dislike this show so much because a lot of really dumb people online hate this show for all the wrong reasons. They're upset that a black woman is playing a main character. They hate that an Asian guy is playing the main Jedi. That really pisses them off. It's too woke. Go broke. Shut your fucking mouth. I am so tired of how boring they are with their fake ass criticism, and I hate it because then when I say I don't like this show, some people are gonna think I hate it for the same reasons. I don't. I love the cast of this show. This cast is solid, but they're completely wasted. It's a complete waste of Amanda Stenberg. It's a complete waste of Daphne Keane, who does fucking nothing in this show and then dies. It's a complete waste of Carrie Ann Moss and Lee Chung-chae, who took this opportunity to play his first role outside of Korea coming out of Squid Game. He learned English for this role, and he's good in it. He and Maddie Jacinto are the best part of the series. They're the only 2 characters with potential, but they are stuck in a bullshit fucking story that is so lifeless and meandering, completely devoid of anything worthwhile, a narrative that is so inconsistent, it feels like it is constantly getting bored of itself and taking its already short runtime to boring flashbacks that recontextualize the mythology of the Force in the dumbest ways, and that is trying to tell like 3 stories at the same time but doesn't know which one to pick as the main one. I was so frustrated watching this thing. And the thing is, it's not even the worst Star Wars show. Objectively speaking, there has been worse. But it's what this show represents. It's how this show is yet another reminder that this is what the standard has become for Star Wars. A poorly aging franchise now comprised of more misses than hits, and that is at best aggressively mediocre, and this is just what we gotta accept from it. This is what Star Wars is now. A boring franchise with no imagination that sometimes, once in a blue moon, will have a genuinely good entry like Andor. Listen, The Acolyte show has its fans, and I'm glad they liked it. I wish I had been able to enjoy it as well, but bro, no. Cool action sequences or not, I am so fucking tired of Star Wars' underdeveloped, lazy-ass garbage writing that has nothing to offer aside from the promise of ties to better-known characters. This show has the fucking gall to end with a tease of Darth Plagueis for a potential season 2. Fuck you. Fuck you. I'm done. I'm just done with this franchise. You have no idea how insane it is for me to just skip a Star Wars project. I've been hearing good things about the new Skeleton Crew show with Jude Law. Apparently it's a fun time, but dude, I just cannot be bothered. Even if people had been saying this is the best thing since Empire, I don't think I would have any desire to watch it. I'm just over it. I am over Star Wars. And you know what? I don't think I'm the only one. I don't think I'm the only person for who this show was a breaking point. Because not only did The Acolyte have the lowest launch of any Star Wars show on Disney Plus in terms of audience numbers, it was also reported that the audience that did watch kept getting smaller week after week after week. Meaning, most people who started this show didn't think it was worth finishing. People kept abandoning ship. The show spent its entire run bleeding viewers to the point where the season finale had the lowest viewership of any Star Wars show on Disney Plus, which was a big enough problem for The Acolyte to become the very first Star Wars show to be cancelled. I am officially not interested in any of the Star Wars projects to come, and it hurts my childhood to say this. I don't care about The Mandalorian and Grogu. I don't care for the Rey New Jedi Order movie. That's definitely not gonna happen. I don't care about Skeleton Crew. I have one fuck left to give to Star Wars, and it's reserved for Andor Season 2. After that, I am fucking out of here. Sorry for the rant. I had to get that off my chest. Whew, okay. Before we get to number 1, let's take a quick moment to acknowledge some dishonorable mentions. Those terrible shows that almost made the list but came just short because I somehow found worse. Man, if it continues like that, I'm gonna have to make top 20s. Good Times is one of the worst animated series to come out in the last decade. In a year where Western animation made such a prestigious comeback, this show existing is a little embarrassing. The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, Season 2. I don't know, man. I just couldn't get into it. This show just doesn't work for me. I tried to force myself to watch this season, gave up 5 episodes in, I couldn't do it. Percy Jackson and the Olympians. I said in my video that I didn't think it was bad enough to make the list, but it still deserves a dishonorable mention because the more this show has sat with me, the less I liked it. And it is one of the biggest disappointments of the year. The show had no right to be this mid. Monsters, the Lyle and Eric Menendez story. This one is self-explanatory, fuck this show. Echo is not the worst MCU series ever made, but it is far from being the best. I actually like the character, but I found the story so boring, it took me months, literal months, to force myself to get through those 6 episodes of TV. Uzumaki is one of the biggest disappointments of the decade. I had been waiting for this adaptation of one of my favorite mangas by master of horror Junji Ito. I was convinced it was gonna make the top 10 best list, but Adult Swim fucked its animators over, and this turned out to be one of the biggest disasters of the year. The Veil is one of the most underwhelming spy thrillers I've seen in the last few years, and it is a complete waste of Elizabeth Moss. And Palm Royale, a show I was extremely excited to see and that seemed very promising, but that ended up being the definition of style over substance. I'm pretty positive I only finished it because it was pretty to look at. And that is it for our dishonorable mentions. And with that out of the way, time to finish the year. Number 1. Cruel Intentions. So you probably noticed that a number of shows on this year's list are reboots or revivals of pre-existing shows or movies. The TV reboot trend has been particularly active in recent years, especially since COVID, and I've been pretty vocal about how bad they are for the most part. Some of them could be considered the worst shows on television, and up till now, I have claimed as loudly as possible that the HBO Max Gossip Girl reboot was the worst this trend had to offer. It is my least favorite show of all time, and I never thought another TV reboot could even get close to being as bad as that abomination of a show. And yet, I stand corrected. This year, we got a TV remake of Cruel Intentions, the 1999 classic drama starring Sarah Michelle Gellar, Selma Blair, and Reese Witherspoon. Fun fact, that movie had a sequel series made by NBC that was supposed to come out in 2016. Sarah Michelle Gellar actually reprised her role from the movie, and they even shot a pilot, but NBC was not convinced and ended up pulling the plug on the project, and it never came out. And then, a few years later, in 2021, Amazon Prime announced they would be taking a crack at it and decided to make a Cruel Intentions TV show. Not a sequel to the movie, but a remake. Now, the thing is, the Cruel Intentions movie was a modernized adaptation of a classic French novel called Les Liaisons Dangereuses that was published in 1782. The reason why I'm mentioning that is because when Amazon Prime announced they were making a new version of Cruel Intentions, I thought that they knew it would be fucking stupid to try and recreate the 1999 movie, so I just assumed they would be making a more direct adaptation of the novel as a period piece, because in my head, that was the most intelligent thing to do. But no, that's not what they did. These morons tried to remake the movie. This entire show is just Amazon going, hey, here's an exact replica of the 1999 movie, except this time it sucks. And it's also way longer than it ever needed to be. Why on earth did they make this? Who was this for? This show isn't even really trying to be Cruel Intentions. It's trying to be Gossip Girl, but with the plot of Cruel Intentions. And it fails at both. The whole thing about Cruel Intentions is that it's scandalous and sexy, but it has a point. The movie is making a point. This show fails at being scandalous, it fails at being sexy, and it completely fails at driving its point. Everything about this remake is as fucking shallow as you can imagine. action. It has no substance, once again. The characters are incredibly bland and unconvincing, once again. The seductiveness of the story falls completely flat, which is really frustrating to me. Dude, you had one job. Be sexy. One job. It's like a sanitized version of the story. It's completely ripped of any edge it could have had. But most of all, it just doesn't have any personality. The thing that made the original movie so memorable was how witty it was. The banter between the characters and their sarcastically sultry performances was the magic of it. There is none of that to be seen here. The performances are so underwhelming at every turn. The cast is just not up to the task here. Nobody has any fucking chemistry. Nobody can sell the sheer sense of desire that is supposed to loom over the story at all times. And oh my god, Savannah Lee Smith? Again? Guys, I swear to God, this girl is talented. She's good. She can act, but I don't know why she always finds herself in those shitty reboots. Girl! Gossip Girl 2021 wasn't enough? You're too good for this! Run! I do not understand why they made this remake if they had absolutely no intention of elevating it, updating it, changing anything about it. It's just plainly a lesser version of the movie you've already seen. It is devoid of anything creative. It is so creatively bankrupt. It truly has nothing to offer. It tries to be edgy, but just comes out cringe, and it's so tame for what it's supposed to be that you can't help but wonder what the point of even greenlighting it was. It's like the showrunners signed on to produce a remake of a raunchy, sexy, debauchery-filled, luxurious, erotic thriller, but had absolutely no desire for it to be raunchy, sexy, debauchery-filled, or luxurious. This entire show feels like it was made reluctantly. That's how bad it is. Even by the standard of the term generic, this is painfully and noticeably soulless. You can't try to remake something like Cruel Intentions and also try to play it safe. If you're not gonna have the balls to go for it at full speed, then don't fucking make the thing. Cruel Intentions is the most hollow, the most half-assed, the most empty fucking show of the year by a landslide. I hated every second of it, and to me, this is the perfect representation of how lazy television is becoming with this trend of rebooting 90s and early 2000s legends with absolutely nothing new to offer, nothing new to bring to the table. This trend of remaking classics just for their names, knowing full well that what we're gonna get is a cheap ripoff that's gonna be worse than the original. This is the most blatant corporate bullshit fuckery in the world. I didn't think a show could be more soulless than Gossip Girl 2021. And you know what? Maybe it's the recency bias talking right now because this show just came out at the end of November. But dude, I think Cruel Intentions takes the cake. Cruel Intentions might just be the most soulless show currently in Hollywood. And it is, without the shadow of a doubt, the worst show of 2024. Happy New Year, kiddos.
She's a queen bee, she thinks she's so carefree. She forgot she knows me from that night in Bali. It's okay though, doesn't bruise my ego. She's moving like Riri, eyes red like Hitachi. She's dancing in Rio, my song on the radio. She's dancing in Rio, my song on the radio.